Hey, good evening. How we doing today? Long time
Yeah,
coming, right? I feel like it's been a while. Ooh, yeah, how you doing, bro?
I am. I feel good. I
Yeah.
feel real good. Like not in the sense of the word that the typical answer that we give when we're asked, "How do you feel?" or "How are you doing?" I genuinely feel good. Like my body feels good. My mind feels good. My heart feels good. My life feels good. So I feel good. Truthfully.
Awesome.
How about
Awesome.
you?
I'm tired. I need a nap right now in 30 seconds. Nah. But right. Yeah. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Metamorphosis tonight. Tonight's topic is going to be around masculinity. That's going to probably be our onset into our masculinity series. Talking about it because some reason Black trans men is a huge conversation with amongst our community. Is defining because I guess in a way we're redefining masculinity, right? Trying to make ourselves more visible. Makes that change. So hopefully, you get something out of tonight's conversation is good for you. Again, as always, please comment, because I'm gonna try to, I try to stay tuned to the comments, read your comments aloud when they come across, join in this conversation. Um, but so let me go ahead and start with the first question. The first question is, what is your definition of masculinity? I'm gonna go ahead and go first. So for myself, masculinity is that's a good question. Like for me, masculinity is more like around is your energy, right? Masculinity is more like a providing dominant energy. If that makes sense, it's um like feminine energy, like when it comes like yin and yang for me, like that's how when last time I think of like energy, like matching, right? Because like it's more provider giving. Like I've always had masculinity, I've always had dominant energy. Like it's I'll be around guys like, man, you more masculine than me sometimes because it's just like I just give that strongness, right? Not saying that femininity is weak or anything, but it's like there's a strong power behind it where like with the femininity it's a little bit more power, but it's a little bit softer power, if that makes sense. But it's still they're both just as powerful.
Hmm.
But for me, like masculinity, like again, it's like more like the builder and like uh I don't know. That's I guess that's how I see masculinity. Like when somebody says masculinity, what I see. That's what I see when I in my mind when I hear the word masculinity or somebody says something about masculinity.
Mm.
What about you, bro?
So I'm very much I feel like masculinity, um, for me, if I could depict a picture, because it's easier for me to explain that way. But the way that I see masculinity is like um, the structure and in relationship to I think it's more clear when I pose it in um, partnership or in conjunction with femininity. But for me, if femininity is water, masculinity is the container. So I believe that femininity is like very much like flow. How I experience, let me say, how I experience femininity is very much flow, like water.
Hmm.
And I believe that masculinity comes in and channels, um, creates the structure around. So if you could envision like a cup of water, right? We know water is powerful all on its own, and a cup is able to be is a cup is going to be a cup all on its own. But I believe in the relationship of femininity and masculinity, um, to highlight the gifts of both. Um, so for me, when we're talking about masculinity, the words that come to mind are obviously provision, structure, strategy. Those are the things that I believe that really are at the core um, of masculinity for me. Um, and I won't go too far because I know we have a whole conversation to have, but I know that that certainly impacts how I move, and the things that are related to my own personal natural energy. Um, I don't believe masculinity is synonymous with macho. But
Mhm.
I do believe that there is a grounding. I think there's a grounding in masculinity that exists, um, that makes it different, and which is supposed to be. Um, so I'll retract a little bit and let you continue with the questions because I know we're gonna get into it tonight.
Yeah, so real quick, I just went ahead and, did a quick Google search of masculinity and the definition of it, right? And Google kept it real simple. It just says it's the qualities and attributes in regard of characteristics of men and or boys. So
Mm,
basically, to me, that just says it's societal's ideal of masculinity, of what a man is or what a boy should be. Right? That's what that translates to me and how I understand that. Masculinity is just a social construct at the end of the day.
I don't 100% agree with you there.
Okay.
I believe that as anything, we take an idea because as people, as humans, we always think we can make something better, right? So we'll
Mhm.
take an idea and we'll continue to build on that idea, um, in until it's like until we have like uh, cultivated it to our own liking, right? Um, but I don't think masculinity itself, actual masculinity, is not a social construct. I do think it's an energy. I think it's a way of being. I think that it is so important to talk about its relationship to femininity because what's the most important at the top of that hierarchy is not masculinity or femininity, it's balance. That's
Mhm.
the key. That's the kicker. And I think when we think of masculinity these days, what people are calling masculinity, to me, while at the core, I do believe there may be some um, natural things that go on, or some innate things that go on. I think a lot of it is spun out of control, because you don't have a lot of people operating in or teaching genuine masculinity. um, and if we're talking about like raising kids or being around other people, I mean, humans learn through observation. So if
Mhm.
we think that this is what masculinity is supposed to look like, we're going to try to emulate that. And I'm so sorry, bro. Give me 1 second. I have a
What's up?
phone call I need to take, so bear with me just a moment. I'll be right back.
Oh, oh, no worries, no worries. So, I just want to tap in because I was able to find a little bit of like with kind of going back to my definition of masculinity. I was able to find the words that I was trying to think of as I was describing it. And for myself, it was strength, responsibility, incompetency. This also what I found out says obsession and presence, right? But for me, it's more strength, responsibility, and competency. And that's where it comes in, like being a protector, right? And it kind of tap in a little bit to what Chauncey was saying there about how it's all about how one comes, how the culture pretty much defines it. Because I feel like masculine is also defined by culture. It's how you teach uh someone how or show them how to be masculine, how to be a man, right? And I feel like that's really based off of culture at the end of honestly, because I feel like even because a lot of times, like I know if you go to other countries and you see how men carry themselves, you'll see that it's different from how men carry themselves here in the U.S. Right? And you just do the same thing in even different regions of the United States, of when it comes to masculinity, because a lot of men may see that. masculine is not you're not masculine or a man if you care about your children, which I feel like that's like a toxic thing, right? But in some cultures, they're like, no, you're less of a man if if you're not if you don't care for your children, right? So it's just uh, again, I kind of like what you were saying, Johnson, like more of like it's about how you were brought up and how you see it, if that makes sense. You, you're muted.
That's
There we go.
yeah, I caught it. um, that's the truth, and I apologize again. I missed the
Oh no,
onset of
no,
what
no.
you said.
I
Uh,
just basically was saying that I had looked up masculinity while you were talking for a second, kind of because I was trying to find the specific words that I was looking for when I was describing it, and I found some like the strength, responsibility, and competency.
mhm,
Were some of the other words I was thinking of to go along with like power and providing, right? It's kind of like
mhm.
for me, that's what masculinity is to me, and then it's talking about how again, it's basically how cultures describe it, right? How it's different in different cultures. You go to different countries and how you see men present themselves is different. How you'll see a man present himself here in the US. And then you might even see that difference within the US as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Um, yes, culturally, I can certainly see across the board. I think that especially here in the states, we have really outdone ourselves when it comes to the idea of masculinity. And what's really for me is what's most concerning is that, like I said, I don't feel like genuine masculinity is being um displayed a whole lot. I think there are people out there, you know what I mean? But I think we live in a society where we get so wrapped up in these trigger words and looking like something versus being something. So people think they need to operate in a certain way in order to be respected. And I think that's really what it boils down to is um, people are externally trying to find themselves uh, from the outside in versus the inside out.
Mm,
And I think it also really highlights because when we talk about masculinity, we use words like strong, powerful, all those things. When femininity is just as strong and powerful, but there's a different affect, there's a different lane. And when both things are operating properly, there's a balance there that's so necessary. And I mean that even within an individual. You know
mm,
what I'm saying? Like even you have to be able to access certain stuff, certain attributes, certain pieces of yourself within. And if you're defining yourself externally, you won't be able to do that.
mm,
Um, and I think this is such a wide conversation because you're talking about masculinity, but then you can get into the conversation about self-awareness and self-worth
mm.
based on you see what I'm saying? Like it's like layers upon layers, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a out of control cake, man. It's huge, you know what I'm saying? There's just layers on layers. And this is why I mean, as you can see, I use the tagline the most powerful ownership is responsibility. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And that's not specifically for women, men, masculine people, feminine people,
mm,
non-binary people. That's I believe that there's a power, there's so much power on the inside of you that if you learn how to access that, you won't be so caught up in trying to figure out what other people are categorizing you as. Because my goal is not to be the most macho man or the most masculine man in the building. I want to be effective. You understand
mm.
me?
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
ability to be effective and be
Yeah.
comprehensive
Yeah.
outweighs, but that comes from me studying internally, like me, what I desire, what I care about, how I want to
Mm,
show up in this world.
yeah.
You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
So real quick, let me go ahead. Let me go ahead. With that, let me go ahead and tap into the second question, right?
Okay.
the second question is how have you embodied your masculinity, right?
Well, I would say the key words that I gave before when I talk about masculinity is grounding, provision, structure, strategy. Right? Those are the things that I believe that doesn't mean those are the only attributes I possess. It just means those to me are in the more masculine category of how I exist. And I tend to exist that way more times than not, if you will. And the way that I embody my masculinity is through service. A lot of people feel like there's this being synonymous between a king, like like a king and masculine. You know what I mean? Like you are to be served. But if people really understood how a king thinks, a king makes sure his people eat first. He makes sure his people straight, and then he eats, or then he moves, or what have you, right? So one of the major ways that I embody my masculinity is through service, is through protection, um, is through being a grounded individual in situations, to attempt to lead by example. You can't see your reflection in boiling water. So I think it's so important that if I have the ability to ground myself and structure a situation to come to the result, that's how I operate, whether it's work, whether it's my relationship, whether it's with my friends. Always being a thinker, always being an individual that is trying to provide a solution to an issue, and protect the people around me, and at the very utmost being in service of those that I love and those in my community. Um, because I genuinely think it's not about me being like reverenced or uplifted or being the king. It's I think that is really my responsibility. The way that I move through the world is that people around me that I love and care for, they're my responsibility. And I'm going to do what is necessary to make sure that they're protected. And when I say that, I mean not even people that I just know. I look out for other folks in public. You know what I'm saying? Like I just make sure that folks is straight. And that is service is I feel like I'm constantly in service. Um whether I know you or not. Obviously more so if I know you because I'm responsible for you. But
So like when you say in service though, like what do you mean in service? Like what's an example of like in something in service that you've done or that you do?
I mean j- literally just making so if we want to let's okay, here we go. um One of the things that I do especially around pride time is I work with Tyson, and we all know
Mm.
Tyson in the community. If you don't know Tyson, check him out. Phoenix Enterprises. um this man is top tier when it comes to protecting our community. um but I work with him because Tyson is like he as a person has been like a professional mentor for me in a way of he is in service of the community. So like Tyson will be doing security work, but you'll see him make sure that people, got water, or people, they have like things, whatever they need. You know what I mean? It's not just like this macho attitude. He's in service. He's the complete owner of a company, and he will never ask you to do whatever he has not done. And I see that reflection in myself of
Mhm.
when I'm around people. I don't care, like the titles don't matter to me. You understand me? Like I'm in service. Whatever I
Mhm.
can do, I'm going to do to assist. You understand what I'm saying?
Now that makes me wonder, like, so when you say in service, and is it you're how would you say, like, okay, I'm trying to find a word, like nurturing, right? They say that feminine energy and women are more nurturing when it comes to roles. Would you say how would you say that's different for you when you say in service versus just like being nurturing and caring?
I don't know that it's 100% different. Like I do have a nurturing side to me. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
Because I do nurture for me is just planting seeds and watering those seeds. You understand me? But for the difference, I believe for me specifically is that just because I'm in service in a structural way.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like I'm not necessarily catering to emotions, or I'm not necessarily, I am making sure people are okay, but
mm,
one could also say that's part of being a protector.
percent. I was also thinking provide.
What providing as well. And I think for
Mhm,
me, it's like um protection doesn't only come in the way of you're in danger, like physical danger.
mhm,
Especially in our community, we should be willing to protect our the ability to exist, the mental health of the people around us, um, having conversations. But the other thing is I think that what makes my service different is that I'm not just telling you you're perfect. I'm not just saying everything is okay. No,
mhm.
I'm protecting you from being harmed, whether it be mentally or physically or what have you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm also doing a service to you by making sure you understand that you have opportunities here. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so I'm not just like, oh, like come into my bosom, everything is okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
not just like that. I am very like, and you can vouch for this in knowing me, but I'm very kind to people. I'm very polite to people, but I also fucking hold people accountable.
Yeah, that's the part. That's the part. It's more of like
You
in a sense
know
of
what I
like tough,
mean?
kind of in a sense of like tough love,
Correct,
and
correct.
in a way, right? It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be there for you. I'm gonna care for you, but I'm gonna let you fall on your face. But I'm gonna be there to help you pick yourself back up,
Yeah, I'll wipe your face. I'm cool
right?
with that.
You know, and so like I 100%, you know, I get that too, right? And I'm gonna say I'm not trying to put this all on an interview of you, by the way. And right now, it's just like my curiosity spiked when a couple of things that you said, because like the other thing that I thought that I wanted to ask too from what you said was responsibility, right? You said that you take responsibility of those around you, but do you have a limit of, because it kind of also goes into the in service part too, of like how much responsibility do you take when it comes to caring for others?
Hmm. That's a great question, man. I think, I mean, and again, I'll point to my tagline this evening: the most powerful ownership is responsibility. I believe one of my purposes in life is really to help people turn an internal lens to themselves and really help them understand how much power they really have. I tell my kids, I don't want to give you the life that you desire.
Mhm.
I want to teach you how to create the life that you deserve. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Mhm.
I don't want to give you what I didn't have. I want you to be able to get what you want. Like I want like the difference is I want you to be able to be at the helm of that ship.
Mhm.
And the only way to do that is I don't want to fish for you. I want to teach you how to fish.
Yes.
And I'm also still being taught how to fish.
Mhm.
But at this point in my life, I can at least feed myself. You
Yeah.
understand?
Mhm.
I might have not have opened up a fish market yet,
Mhm.
but I can
Yeah,
at
yeah,
least
yeah, yeah.
feed myself, right?
Yeah.
And I want to teach other people, and not even necessarily teach, but I would like to influence or inspire other people to look internally and understand how much power exists within you.
Yeah.
So responsibility for me, responsibility sounds like a bad word to people, but when you are responsible for things,
Mhm.
like, yes, you do take the blame,
Mhm.
but you also control the credit.
Mm. What do you
And
mean?
so I heard a quote one time that said, "I'll never let anybody be responsible for feeding me because they can also starve me."
Yes.
So what is so important is that I know that a hungry man can't hear, so your first meal is on me.
Mhm.
But once your stomach is full, now I'm trying to teach you how to feed yourself.
Yes.
That's important. I don't want to take care of you for the rest of your life. I do
Yes.
not,
Mhm.
because I don't desire to have that sort of power over you, and I don't desire you to have that sort of dependency on me.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
we live in a world and also a community that oftentimes, because yes, I know queer people have a hard way to fucking go.
Mhm.
You understand me?
Yeah.
I do not think we push back enough, and I do not think we make people take enough responsibility. I think that we are too concerned with coddling and making shit feel better, and we are not making sure that people are able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Before I go to the next question, let me go ahead with that. Let me go into let me explain my how I've embodied
Yeah,
masculinity, and then we're gonna go to the next question.
yeah,
Because what you're saying kind of made me want to go into that, but I want to take a moment, right? Um, so how I've embodied my version of masculinity, right, is like I don't feel like I embodied it. I feel like it's always been there for me. I've never been the I've never I had to purposely if you ask me about my journey, I will say that I tried to be a girl and I failed. I've always struggled with femininity and what that looks like, right? And I don't know if it's because of my upbringing, but I've always been number one the protector, right? I've always been the one to care for everybody, to make sure everybody was okay. Like I want to, yeah, and because like when you said like you're hungry, so I'm gonna make sure you eat, but don't come. I'm gonna help you that one time, but I'm not going to turn around again and just keep feeding you over and over again. Once, maybe twice, but there's not third time. I'm not feeding you because by that time you're dependent on me. Only people that I'm gonna feed like that is my kids and my dogs.
yeah,
Because I took on the responsibility of caring for them.
yeah,
Right. So that's but so embodying masculinity has never been something I feel like I've done because I feel like that's always who I've been. I've always been a masculine person from literally I look at pictures of me as a child and I've always seen myself as a masculine person. So I've always carried a very strong masculine energy. That's always been me. Right. Oh, welcome to the stage. Welcome, Eric. Here he is. How you feeling, bro?
What's up, man?
You look like you feeling good.
It's good to see you.
Howdy, howdy. Can you hear
All
me
right.
all right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome to
I'm
the
feeling
party.
all right, you know,
Yeah,
as good as I can be for
awesome.
somebody who got hit by a car last week. So,
Yeah,
Amen. And you here, amen, blessed and highly favored.
there
Okay.
we go.
let's go.
There we go. All right. So just to catch you up a little bit, we jumped on the topic of masculinity a little bit. Um, we two questions that were asked. If you want to just kind of just if you take a moment, if you want to think about it or jump in. The first one was how do you define masculinity, and then how have you embodied your version of masculinity, your definition of masculinity, right?
Um, I'll try to make it quick. I was listening to y'all, so
Okay, cool, cool.
I was trying to, you know.
That's why he jumped in. He said, "I got some shit to say.
Right.
I got some shit to say."
Hold on. Let me throw something in. Let me throw a monkey wrench in here. Let me throw something.
Let
Let
me
me
throw
throw something.
number three in there.
There we
Uh,
go.
so I want to echo probably a little bit of what was said previously. I think masculinity and femininity go hand in hand. I don't
Mhm.
think you can really define one without the other. Um, I kind of think it's redundant for us to separate them in the first place and talk about them as if they are two separate things, when really the totality of a person is just to be good and kind in the way that feels natural to you. So if that means that you show up in what others would perceive to be more masculine ways, then that's how they perceive you. And maybe that's also how you perceive yourself, which is great. That's in alignment with how you perceive yourself. You know, we don't want to be misunderstood or perceived in a way that we don't define ourselves, right? All the time. Sometimes we don't care, and we probably shouldn't, but it still feels nice when we're in alignment with how people perceive us. So the energy you show up in, other people will perceive it one way or the other. Um, so masculinity to me is really just being yourself in a way that protects you, that provides for yourself, because that's how you're going to express yourself out into the world, right? So it should really start with how we take care of ourselves. How do you show up for yourself? How do you protect yourself? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you set your boundaries? How do you hold those boundaries?
Mm.
How do you uphold those boundaries with other people, particularly with people you're not used to upholding boundaries with? Um,
Mhm.
and that also plays a part in how you nurture yourself and how you show up for yourself in that way. I think a big part of masculinity is nurturing, because how nice is it when we get a good job from a dad like figure, like
Mhm.
dads are supposed to be the ones that be like, hey, good job, you did a really good job on that. Like
Mhm.
moms do it too, but it's more like, oh, you did such a great job, honey, that's blah, blah, blah. It's like, a good dad good job is just as
Yeah.
nurturing as a good
Mhm.
mom good job, and it has that masculine energy that a lot of us are seeking to experience for ourselves. um, I feel like I answered both questions. I don't remember what the second one was.
It was how have you embodied your definition of masculinity?
Okay. I mean, existing and shit. I don't.
I want to say too, you hit the nail on the head for me in a way that I've never been able to describe it before just now, because when I was coming out and trying to explain to people why I felt like I was trans, right? Why I felt more of a man than I did a woman, it's because of perception. I struggle with being seen as female, read as female. I struggled with that, right? Because it just didn't align with how I felt within myself,
Mm.
right? To be perceived as a female. Not that I have anything against anything feminine, right? I love femininity in itself, because she when as soon as Chauncey was talking about, how look at femininity as water and masculinity as, is structure, right? Is automatically is I think it is me and Tay all the time, right? Is she's the water and I'm the earth, right? So we're doing this together. We're making beautiful things together. So that's the point of it. So just that's why I just want to say that, like, you actually brought that to light and kind of circled that back, because that was something that I kept going back and forth with people about, and they were like, "So you think it's bad to be a woman, or like be it like women are soft, or or that you don't have much say or power as a woman?" I'm like, no, I don't feel that way. It just doesn't align with me. Like, yes, I know I could have that power is strength as a woman, right? But it did. that didn't align with who I was. That version, because again, like there's a feminine aspect to power. Go ahead.
Uh-oh.
And I just don't have it. If that makes sense, I have more of the masculine approach to it within me, and but being read as female, it didn't have that much strength to it. If that makes sense.
Right.
Let me say something real quick because I
Okay.
think a lot of the binary way
Mm,
that we view gender in general,
yeah.
it definitely plays a part in the way that we see that gender and the way that we get treated as people.
Mm,
So, yes, absolutely. It's not about um, any kind of disrespect for women. It's not about thinking that being a woman is less than.
mm,
It's purely about how we are perceived sometimes that really drives that feeling of dysphoria in your body. I don't want to be
mm,
perceived as a woman because I don't feel like what I've been told a woman feels like.
mm,
Women are very happy and proud to be in their bodies. They love showing that off. They love presenting themselves in very particular ways that are very womanly, even if they are masculine.
Mhm.
A masculine woman will still be proud of her chest and
mm,
still show a little cleavage every
mm.
now and then. I,
Yeah,
I did it because people liked it, but not because I liked it. You know, like
I didn't even do that.
I did it for the like attention. So
I didn't even do that
did
at
it
all.
because
No.
people liked looking, but it was rare and it made
Mm,
me uncomfortable. And I
yeah.
did not want to be perceived in that way. So I totally get it. That needs to be said because I think some people do have that perception like, oh, you think being a woman is less than? No, I love women. I think being a woman is the best thing you can be on earth. And I'm pretty sure that's why I came here in this body. It might not have been the way I wanted to be perceived,
Mm,
but I feel that the female biology is superior. No other being can create life. What do you mean? It's the most powerful version of human you can be. It's also the supreme because a male body is a mutation of that. Every being starts as this one thing. The fact that we labeled it as female, okay, whatever.
I I genuinely hate that we talk about femininity and masculinity or women and men and the non-binary food. I hate that we talk about everything as a versus. I hate that we talk about everything as this against that. I feel like everybody got their lane. Like when you have a basketball team,
mm,
everybody got a job to do. You understand?
mm.
And like I mean, let me take this to football because I'm not really versed. Like, talk about. let me let me go over here. Um, you the your O lineman, your quarterback, your receivers. Everybody has a job to do, and everybody has to do their job up here in order for it to be successful. Or else there becomes an imbalance and there's more pressure on somebody else. But if the quarterback throws a dime and the receiver doesn't catch it, it doesn't matter. You understand what I'm saying? You're going right back to the line of scrimmage where it was previously, right? I hate that we have this idea that there is such a competition between men and women, non-binary, like masculine and feminine people, when it's really not. It's really not. The goal is like what I sense from the community right now, what I sense from our community as like queer folks, I sense that there's such a level of erasure when I do feel like there's a place for binary trans folks. I
Mhm.
feel like there's a place for non-binary trans folks. The goal is not to erase anything. The goal is to make room for who exists because everybody got a lane. You understand me?
Yeah.
And my thought process when we talk about strength Like, I don't know who made up the idea that strength cannot be soft, because if we're clear, silk is one of the softest things on the planet, but also one of the strongest fabrics ever. Do you
Mm-hmm.
understand me? So I think what it is like, again, going back to the internal, is that somebody gotta be low for me to be high.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about the way that America specifically deals with femininity, and then subsequently on a overall scale, women who they believe that femininity belongs to women and women belong to femininity, and that's just that, we really have to go back and do we really have to go dig deep and do the work on why the fuck do we hate femininity so much, because there's a lot of hate for femininity, right? Because what is the first thing that we say when somebody, why do we equate weakness with womanhood?
Mm-hmm.
Or why do we say, what's the first thing that people say? Oh, you being a pussy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or you
Yeah.
a bitch, which is also synonymous with,
Weakness. But
correct, but
but
synonymous with what? Women, what we consider
women. Yeah. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
an overall basis. So
Yeah.
if we're really unpacking all of that, it's really, let's talk about what is our issue with femininity, and why is strength synonymous with just masculinity only? Because
Mm-hmm.
really, that's not the truth. Again, I'll say it again, and I'll die on this hill right here, that it has to be a balance. It's got to be a balance. You know what I'm saying? Because if
Mm-hmm.
we continue to be like, if you being masculine makes you feel bigger, then you know what I'm saying, like a feminine individual, you got it wrong already. You
Mm-hmm.
got it wrong already. You ain't even in your masculinity if you feel bigger than a feminine individual, or somebody who exudes more femininity than you do.
Yeah.
Because really, as Eric so eloquently stated earlier, that they don't exist without one another. Dark doesn't exist without light, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And
thank
that
you.
kind of
That's all.
that's why we're here, bro. But that kind of falls into a little bit too, because how you was talking about how the points of like the points of like non-binary, right? And having that intersection to where somebody can play both. I mean, I won't say play both, but can like embody both of those energies within themselves, right? So
Mhm.
like to kind of go to our third question is how does that influence how we see other black trans men? Right? Because I know, like for me, when we started BTMO, it was, I always had this idea that all trans men were more masculine presenting men. I'm gonna be honest. That's how I vision. Like we were all just masculine, almost cis looking. That's what we all strive to be, right? But
Mhm.
as I've gone through this journey and learning the different learning people and seeing people and to get to knowing people and beginning to understand people, I've learned more so of like that there's that being in the middle is just as important as being on the two ends, right?
Yeah,
Because you can bring in another perspective, another point of view into the conversation that whoever's on whatever end you're on can't see because they're only in that mind.
right,
Right?
right.
So having somebody there in the middle to bring that, I feel like it's important. So like I never so coming into this, like for me, that's the change for me. Like that's how it influenced and changed how I see masculinity in a way. Like because like even still, like I was telling you before, I was I was with Judah yesterday, at the Pride event, the Columbus Community Pride, and they want to be who they are, but they are they're identify as a man and a woman. and he she pronouns, right?
Mhm.
And I'm just and I respect that and I love that about them because they're like, no, I like to look pretty, right? But they also pursue that you can still feel that masculine energy coming off of them too.
Mhm.
Even though they look like this beautiful person, you still feel that masculine energy coming through them. And it's the difference between like I almost want to say like power in a way. Like it almost feels it's powerful, right? But it's that masculine power that we were talking about, and not so much that feminine power. So having them go into a room and to have a conversation with you, I feel like will bring something different to the table than somebody that's on the within that that's more lives on the binary. If that makes sense.
Say that last thing you just said again.
Sure, if I can remember what I said, let me
Oh,
rewind the tape a little bit. All right. It's more,
Bringing different perspectives to the binary.
yeah, pretty much.
right, right.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we explore our internal um, biases. So I appreciate that you brought that up, Chris, and mentioning that your initial thought process was that um, most trans men, black trans men, were showing up masculine, and that was the like end goal. Because some people do think that. A lot of people might think that, and it's definitely not the case. You know, some trans men can't even, you know, they don't get the opportunity to have top surgery. Some of them don't even want to in
Mhm.
general.
Yeah.
They like their bodies. They just know they're not a woman, you know. Um, and maybe they end up in the trans non-binary category more often than not, but I think it's important to allow people to be free in that self-expression, to show up however they show up. Their energy will let you know what kind of a person they are, and they're allowed to tell you, "Hey, I'm a man, and these are my pronouns," and be in whatever body and presentation they want. So it's definitely important to express that, understand that about ourselves, like the internal bias, and even look at the ways that we can balance that within ourselves. Like Chauncey keeps saying, balance is the most important thing when it comes to this talk about masculine and feminine energy, because it's just your energy and how you show up in the world. You find balance within yourself and how you express yourself, and allow that to be with, regardless of what labels anybody else might put on it, and just be you. Because if I'm looking at like divine masculine, divine feminine energy, pre transition, I existed in my feminine energy a lot, but mostly because I was being passive. I wasn't making decisions for myself. I wasn't actively pursuing the things that I was interested in. Those are masculine energy traits, actively pursuing something that you're passionate about. That has nothing to do with being a man or a woman.
Mhm.
Right? That's just an energy of go get. And the feminine energy is very much, I'm going to curate here. There's a bit of stillness in it. The masculine energy is more movement.
Mm.
Hmm.
I like to take gender out of it altogether.
Yeah. I would say and being passive and aggressive, right? I like how you brought that up because that's the thing too. When people try to define the binary aspect of feminine and masculinity, they align those words there too, right? Is passive and aggressive, right? Because again, when I looked up the definition of masculinity, aggression came up, right? And then a thing that they like to put on black women is why are you so aggressive?
Mhm. Why you acting so masculine?
right? That's basically what they're saying, right? It's like, why you acting so masculine? Why you acting like a man? You need to be more soft and womanly, right? Versus if you being present and saying like, no, I am here too, and you're going to hear what I have to say. And because women are supposed to be passive and soft, that they when they pursue strength and like aggressiveness is frowned upon, right? So again, that's a societal construct. I'm gonna say again of what femininity is supposed to be. Um, so yeah, I because like when you said like you moved in as in passive, like I could see. I will be honest. There is parts of my life now that I know that I was more passive in, right? Even though I know that was more masculine energy, there was still very some passiveness to me that I've been overcoming, right? Just in general, and I don't know where that comes from. It could be just being raised as female or as a woman that may have influenced my passiveness, but I've always struggled with being passive. It never feels good within me, if that makes sense too.
I
So,
just want to clarify, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm specifically labeling like femininity as passive.
oh no, 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 not at all.
And I know you don't, but
Okay,
just in general,
yeah.
I want to acknowledge the variance and degree of how people express their femininity. For me, an unbalanced feminine energy comes through as passive.
Mm,
So I did a lot of work to balance that out. Like, I think the passiveness does come from a bit of the societal construct of what it means to be a woman, right? You're supposed to be quiet, like you mentioned, all of those
mm,
things, like be in the background, don't be too loud, don't have a big opinion, don't be super opinionated, like
be seen and not heard.
some
Yeah,
right, basically. And so
yeah.
um, when you get into that space of also adding, being a part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum, a black person, you feel the need to be a bit more passive so that you're not ruffling feathers
Mm,
on such a variety of different ways, like the intersectionality of the ways that you could be a disruptive energy.
mm,
It's like every time we transitioned into something else,
mm,
and I mean that generally speaking, not necessarily just as trans people, but as people, we transition to different versions of who we are. And the more expansive we become, the more likely it is that we are being disruptive to the regular energy that surrounds us. And
mm.
that can include people, places, and things.
I don't think passive is synonymous with soft, but I also think that passive has been turned into a bad word as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you really look at the definition of passive, um, the dictionary gives a definition of accepting or allowing what happens or what others do without active response or resistance, right? So passive is not synonymous with soft. I think that femininity and masculinity a lot of times get credit for what they do versus the way that they do things, or they're categorized by what you do versus the way that you do things. And I think that's actually where masculinity and femininity show up the most in how you do things. If I can circle back to talking about nurture itself, nurture is usually synonymous with a quote unquote woman's job or the mother or the feminine individual, right? But nurturing is literally just aiding growth and development. So does not everybody nurture?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So we have a habit of being we have a habit
Mhm.
of categorizing things, and not really like doing our own research on things, and really digging into things. We just take somebody's word for it. That's how things get out of whack and out of balance. And I think, is we are in this place where we have this idea that femininity is owned by women and masculinity is owned by men, and then the world mostly doesn't even acknowledge non-binary people, right? And what I say is that there's a spectrum, and I believe that the spectrum has room for everybody, and you find your balance in that spectrum, because every masculine individual, or a person who might exude or live in more masculinity, is not at the same percentage, quote unquote, of masculinity. Same thing with femininity. You find your balancing piece in terms of partnership, and then you roll with that. But again, if we go back and look at it, we're looking at externally how other people are defining us versus what's innate to us. And when I think about my life and transition, like, I wasn't born in the wrong body. I've never said that. I don't believe that. And although I've made some changes and some adjustments, I wasn't born in the wrong body. I was born in a God body that had capacity, a life that had capacity. You know what I'm saying? So when I still kiss and hug my son because that's necessary. However, I also hold him accountable, because I think it's more important to be comprehensive than being what people call a man. I'm talking about a comprehensive individual in society, versus, because if I have to go on what the definition of manhood is right now, current in 2024, you can miss me with that. That ain't it.
Mhm.
That ain't the one that I'm looking for personally. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But again, when we look at people who are trans and transitioning, there at some point in our lives we have observed something or someone or people, and we realize that those people were more in alignment with how we desire to exist, or what we felt or had more in common with, than people who they were telling us that they were. That's really the bottom line of that. So I don't think, like, just like cis men come in all shapes and sizes and different things, sometimes I feel for them because they don't have as much room to explore who they are as people.
Mhm.
You do. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But I shout out people like Judah. You know what I'm saying? People like X. You know what I mean? Because for me, I'm in recognition that in this process of transitioning, I walk through the world. Most people think I'm a cis male. I mean, I'm not about to have this conversation with every single person that I meet, with most people that I meet. That ain't none of your business. I don't even really want you knowing my address or what I like to eat for lunch. You know what I'm saying? So I'm definitely not telling you none of that. But
Mhm.
I understand how that can make my existence a little bit easier than someone like Judah or someone like X. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I commend them, and that's why I said it's not about erasure, because I would consider myself a binary man. Like, I do, there are a lot of traditional things that I hold very close to my heart, and I believe that I see them in the way of the root and how they exist and their purposes, versus in the way that they have been overgrown, if you will. Like this macho aspect. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not nobody's macho. I don't care nothing about that. But there are some things that I do hold dear. But I also, like I was talking about earlier, being in service, I think it's so important to make room for people, like how I how I respond to people that are outside of the norm. I understand now that that is going to influence how other people respond to that. So I take that very seriously. You understand what I'm saying? and there's a gift and there's a godlikeness in that, in all of this. So I think it's important that we protect each other, but I also feel like sometimes um binary folks like myself do get pushed out the loop because we are considered toxic in the way that we show up in things. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's a whole nother Oprah, but
Yeah.
we got some work to do for sure. We
Oh
do
yeah.
got some work to do.
Oh yeah. Uh.
I'll say it. Being seen as a straight man is weird. Like, don't do that. That
Mm.
ain't.
Why you say it's weird? Like, why does that feel weird for you?
It's just because I know how they get treated out in the world. You
Mhm.
know, that contrast is pretty noticeable when I walk around in the world and I can take my shirt off in the middle of God knows where, and ain't nobody really gonna say nothing to me.
Right.
Mm.
Previous to,
Yeah.
Of
somebody was
course.
gonna say something.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
For sure.
that's a very basic example, but it's just it's interesting that people would see me as a straight man. Like I'll say as heterosexual. I
Mm.
don't know why. It just is weird for me.
Yeah.
I feel a little strange around it. Like I don't want to be seen at this point as anything other than just a person who exists.
Yeah.
Like I understand why non-binary people are like, nah, I'm good. Like there's so many there's less restraints around what it means to be non-binary on some level because you can just kind of float or stay where like non-binary people don't owe anybody androgyny, right? They don't owe anybody a certain perception or look or way of being. They don't owe you that. They could very well just be named David or Jessica, and it's their name doesn't have to be Flower or Autumn. I'm sorry, that's a regular name. Star,
Yeah.
and which is cool. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But just saying that the extreme of one end to the other when we're talking about masculinity and femininity and being a non-binary person who basically didn't change the presentation. They still, if it's a person assigned male at birth who still presents as masculine, but they definitely know that they don't necessarily want to be addressed as a man. They know themselves to be non-binary. That perception, the perception of a person who is assigned female at birth, feminine representing feminine presentation, but knows themselves to be non-binary and showing up in the world where people are more than likely going to she her that person all day long and he him that other person all day long when they might prefer they them or one or the other because a lot of people say well they he, but how many people are just defaulting to he instead of they
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
because you seem more masculine or more feminine one way or the other.
I mean, I think that your pronouns are directly correlated with what you feel like people expect of you and what people do expect of you.
Mm.
That's the I feel like that's the 1,000% truth,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So your pronouns are important, but they are important, I think, for the exact same reason, is because I think that as much as we try to push against the binary or we try to push against, you know, all of this stuff is still patterned after like cis people, right? Pronouns in general are patterned after cis people. Like he, she, you know what I mean? They, people act like there's an issue, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important that people address you properly because that then sets the stage for the expectations that they have of you. Don't call me she because I don't want you to presume that I'm gonna be acting she like. Don't call me he because I don't presume that I'm gonna be acting he like. Don't call me, call me they because they. I want you to understand that I either embody all or none of. You know what I'm saying? So that sets the stage because I don't care what people say, man. Identity is so important. Your name, who you are, being black, being white, being whatever. You know what I'm saying? All the shit people can say in public on a public stage and be like, they can say all of the the political-esque things to make it sound good. But the truth of the matter is, don't call me a fucking girl. Because I'm not. Because I don't want you to have those expectations of me. Don't call me white, because I'm not. Because I don't want you to have them expectations of me, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
And while we are synonymously like fighting against these expectations and this bigotry, this bias, all of these things, we still are adhering to those things because that's why we're fighting for what, you know what I mean, for the respect on our name, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a very nuanced conversation. It's a very nuanced situation, just in general. That we will continue to have honest conversations about. Yes, am I influenced by what I consider traditional masculinity? Absolutely. But there are some things that are innate to me too, because this is the part of work that you do within yourself. Like, oh, does this actually match how I feel on the inside, or am I just doing this because I'm being told to?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part I think that we're missing. And that's not just for trans people. That's
Mm-hmm.
for trans people and cis people alike.
Oh yeah.
But the difference is that we get the space and the room to explore that. Most cis people do not.
Yeah. I mean that falls into more than just when it comes to gender and identity in general. Like when you said, the expectations and doing things, because it made me think of like how the stigma around Asian people, they're all gonna be doctors, right? There's
Yeah,
that
no. Some of them are
there's,
DJs.
there's that expectation where they're gonna be good at math, right? And
Right.
they hate math, right?
It's
you
an
know,
Asian somewhere right now giving the wrong change of speedway. I promise.
right?
You know what I'm saying? And that's like no knock. I'm just saying
Yeah.
we have to deal with people for people and not just
Mhm.
group folks
Yeah.
in a fucking category. And we have to be able to respect people regardless of what their identity is. Period.
Yeah.
For sure.
It feels like it seems like that's just a really natural. Like, I don't understand how you're like, oh, you ain't this and you ain't that. Now,
That's how the American society has trained us, right?
yeah,
Not to go on a whole tangent, but we automatically, unconsciously put people in a box based off of how we perceive them,
but that's human nature, though.
and it's
Judgment
exactly
is human nature.
it's something like we can't necessarily, and I feel like that's plays a major role on how trans people are treated, and when it comes to transphobia, right? It's because we don't fit within how people was trained to see people in these boxes. We're outside of the box and they're uncomfortable with it at the end of the day, right?
It's
Because
the
every
colonialization of the world because it is human nature for us to categorize and separate based off of size, color, so on and so forth. But
Mhm.
it's how you treat people because of it.
Mhm.
That's
Because plenty of cultures previous to being colonized by the white man, I'll just say it, we're definitely doing that, but putting people in places of power because they saw the way that changed how they perceived things.
Yeah.
Trans people and people who were gender expansive were treated as if they were the wise people in the village, in the culture, because they had a multitude of different perspectives.
Mm.
We don't have that limited view of being just this one thing and seeing the world from just this one perspective.
Yeah.
We have been perceived and treated as women previous to transitioning. We know what that feels like. It wholly informs who I am as a man,
Correct.
because there were some toxic things I believed I needed to be doing as a man when I first started transitioning, that I truly had to look at and go, that's not who I am. That's not
Yeah.
what I want to do. And as a former woman, I didn't like that shit being anywhere in the vicinity of who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yep.
that's interesting you say that too, because like it made me think too of my partner and whatnot transitioned. Right, her biggest struggle with me transitioning was her perception of what men are like and how they treat women. Right,
Mm.
just in that perspective of how they carry themselves and how they do things.
Mm.
And I had to show her and explain, well, not show her, but like explain to her, like, I've always been this person. All because now I'm being perceived as a man doesn't mean that I'm going to act differently than I already was. Doesn't mean I'm going to act like this toxic masculinity, this masculine person that you are accustomed to, because that's not who I am. I've
Yeah.
never been that way. Like in a way, almost always said I'm going to be less like the men that I had as influences in my life and be a better man than I felt that they were.
Mm.
Let's go.
Right? Go ahead.
I'm trying to formulate my words. So y'all carry on.
We just gonna sit in silence and just wait.
um,
It look like it's about to be good too.
here,
Uh,
here, here's the thing about talking about being, because somewhere along the way, Chris, you observed men or a man or some men in your life that you was like, yo, that makes more sense to me. That's how we got here. That's how we all got here, right? And
mhm,
somewhere. So and this is the issue that I be having. I don't hate men. I appreciate them. I do not. I think there's a lot of bullshit that goes on in like between men, you know. But I also understand, the truth of the matter is, like, if I have to circle back to something that you said about, your partner being like, they thought they were having difficulty accepting you because of how they viewed men in general. I think the one thing that we're skipping over here is, as people who are transitioning into being read, um, as men, then there's a level of expectation. So I think it's fair for our partners to be concerned in a way of, well, how are you going to react to that? Because now there's going to be a different expectation of you that there was prior to,
mhm,
right? But also, like, I hear a lot of conversation about people being like, in the trans community, like, I hate men, I want to be a better man. And this is true. I get it. Like, I understand wanting to be better, than we have a unique viewfinder, if you will. We have a unique experience
mhm,
that certainly influences how we move or navigate through that process of transition. And if you're doing it right, you're kind of checking in at every stage, right? But this idea of just hating men, it really fascinates me and confuses me, because it's like, well, how do you even consider transitioning into a trans man without understanding that something had to influence you in that way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm,
But again, I understand that we live in a world of very much like trigger words or buzzwords or things like that. People say things that sound good and don't really critically think about what is behind them. Um, I don't got no beef with men. I got a beef with how some men act, but that's also trans men. So that's not only specific to cis men. You
yeah.
understand what I'm saying? I got a beef with how somehow some women act, trans women and cis women. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But do I have like I don't fucking hate men. I appreciate the ability to come into this world and choose how I wanted to exist and have examples of that in this world.
Yeah.
And I don't
And,
think we talk about that enough. Like it's like the cool thing to be like, yo, I don't fuck with cis men. And that's kind of weird to me.
and I would say this too, like but I can see that in both sides, right? Not just within the trans experience or just within like somebody in the LGBTQ experience of hating like men, or I've seen that in cis hetero men where they see a man or they're even their father and they're like, I'm not going to be anything like him.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that.
So and the same thing, people see it could go the same way with women. Like a woman, like, no, I'm not going to be like this version of a woman that they saw, right? So that's just something. That's how we learn and to become ourselves because we see something that's like, no, that don't fit right within me and within my energy. So
Yeah,
I'm not gonna be that or learn to do that or be that way,
yeah,
right? And I feel like that's important to have those influences, right? Because this is how we talked about feminine and masculine energy, right? How they both are needed and how dark and light needs it. We need to see these different versions of being so that
right.
we could figure out who we are
Yeah,
and how we're going to navigate through our lives,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because imagine if we never saw a man in our life, right? Being born as a woman, brought up as a woman, and never seeing a man, so never being so confused on why this didn't sit right, right? We never had that, not having that influence of masculinity to understand that we were feeling internally,
yeah.
right?
So I want to speak to a couple of different things. One, as a former man hater, um, I most recently just stopped hating men. It What informed who I am as a man was how I got treated and the opposing of I don't want to make women feel like that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And even before I transitioned, I don't want to make other women feel like that. Just because I show up masculine
Hmm.
doesn't mean I got to treat women differently
Yeah.
than I would want to be treated as a person.
Hmm.
So I most recently, probably in the past year, 2 years, had to address that within myself, my hatred towards men, because I could, if anyone could, if you looked at history, you could blame men for a lot of shit.
War. That's fine.
War. Period. I mean, once they said women couldn't do nothing and they had to stay at home and do everything, we pretty much could blame them for everything that happened after that.
Mhm.
But there are men who have done very great things. They're the ones who did show up and say, no, we need to be listening to all the people, not just the men. We need to listen to all the men, not just the white ones. Like we had to have those people who were progressive in their thought process, even when they didn't see it around them.
Right.
And so I see, for me personally, if I was born into a land where it was nothing but women and there were no men to inform how I showed up as a man, I would just be a different person. I feel like I would still have ended up like this somehow.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I need men to show me how to be fully myself, because that's how I define my masculinity and my femininity. It's based off of who I am and how I feel good when I show up for other people. It is also informed by how I've been treated, by how I've seen other people do it. I had to seek those out though, if that makes sense. Like, not
Yeah.
to say that that wasn't implied, but I very specifically at a particular point in time in my transition started seeking out men who represented masculinity the way that I wanted to express it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that helped me be like, okay, let me shape let me shape Eric into the person or the man that I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a balance of like knowing internally who you are, because you've been saying this the whole time, Chauncey, a balance.
Yeah.
Knowing internally of who you are, what you desire, how you want to be treated, how you want to make other people feel,
Yeah.
and then also your external influences. How have men treated you? How have men treated other people around you? What does that look like in your external, community? What does masculinity look like if it isn't coming from someone you perceive as a man? What does it look like coming from women? What does it look like coming from non-binary people?
And I go back to just saying that, women or feminine people don't own femininity, and masculine people don't own masculinity,
Mm.
and that includes men. Because every man ain't masculine and every woman ain't feminine. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Um, I think it's just important to see people for who they are. You know what I mean? But on the scale of entirety, you know what I mean? I do think there's like, you were talking about like building if you were never informed, like there were no men involved. Like if we went to a world where there was just no men involved, like you somehow would have still ended up where you are. You know what I mean? And and I do understand that, but also our decisions were also informed by a level of influence as well.
Mhm.
And I do think that when we look at the world, I do think there are spaces where femininity operates well, better, and where masculinity operates better.
Mhm.
And I do think that in large that oftentimes I do think that people um lean to one side or another. You know what I mean? And there are people that are perfectly in between, or generally in between, which is our non-binary siblings, and I believe in that. Before I even understood what trans was, I was calling myself a third gender because I understood how I was born.
Mhm.
In my mind, I never actually transitioned though, because I've always been this same mind, the same innate things that have been within me. I've always been that person. The only thing that's actually changed is my body and how I showed up, physically in the world. Um, and I think everybody's story is different in that respect, but um, I guess I could just go back to saying like it's not about like the verses, but more so of the making room for, because I think that if we can get with the program of just making room for everybody can have a fucking lane. You know, I enjoy going out and providing for my family. I enjoy getting the spoils and bringing them home. I enjoy the idea of being the center of structure and provision for my family structure, or even for other uh, groups, or things that I'm involved in. You know what I mean? That's a natural thing that comes to me. I enjoy strategy. That's why I think about things the way that I do. You know what I'm saying? That's why I pick things apart the way that I do. So for me, that's something that works. I've never said that women or feminine people cannot do certain things, but if you ask the average person who leans on the feminine side, and I'm just gonna say, if you ask most women, can they provide for a home? Absolutely. They've been doing it for decades. If you ask them if they want to, most of them are gonna tell you hell to the no if they
but
have a
there,
choice. But if I
there's
have
some
a
that
choice,
will. So
I mean, there's some. I'm not saying that's a difference
okay.
between willingness,
No, yeah.
ability, and desire. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I'm not, because we're not talking about the ability of women. Because first of all, as you said, as the creatures, like the most spiritual creatures and the creatures that are most connected to creation, I feel like women have the ability to do every fucking thing.
Mhm.
Here's what I'm telling you is that in my experience in my life, the sorts of individuals that I am in relationship with, which are typically women, generally they do not fucking want to be the provider. And that's it, and that's all. And I
Mhm.
don't have a problem with that, because I don't think that makes them weaker than me. I think that we have innate things that we desire internally. I do not desire to keep a home. I do not desire to be a kept person. I'm even a person that if I won the lottery today, while I certainly there will be signs, I will have a Tundra truck, I will travel the fucking world, but there will be some sort of work that I
Mhm.
will be doing, because
Mhm.
work makes me feel alive.
Yeah.
Being able to strategize and put things in motion and structure things makes me feel alive. That taps into my innate abilities, my innate desires.
Mhm.
If I ask my mate if she won the lottery of $1 billion today, what the first she finna travel the world for the rest of her life.
Mhm.
She not going to nobody's job. She ain't finna do no work because she good. But work actually ignites something in me. I do not get um drained. Work hypes me up. I was in the gym one time and working out with a friend, and he said, I never seen somebody that gets stronger as the set goes on. But for me, the more exhausted I am, there is a level of ignited that I get that happens within me innately. That doesn't always happen with my feminine counterparts. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that's okay, because if I can be what people would call toxic, I would prefer a counterpart that wants to create sanctuary versus be out in the world having to fight the world on a regular basis. That's just my personal experience. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I'm just falling into just, I don't know, like it's not always just external in the things that we always just observe. There are some things that drive us innately as well. So I'm agreeing with you in that if you had showed up in a world full of women, that you would have still ended up like this. It may not physically look the same, but we would be operating in the same way. I think the
Mhm.
way that we are able to present ourselves and navigate in life just are based on the opportunities that we have, because there are trans people that have come, years before us that didn't have the same physical opportunities as we had. You know,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah, yeah. But we
Can I
are
just
way over right away.
we are
So go
over,
ahead.
but
Get
no, we
your
not. No, we not.
which thing is
all
it
right.
if you don't want to do either of the things?
What'd you say?
And non-binary.
What the hell that is? Hey, which thing is it if you don't want to do either? I don't want to provide,
I don't want to
or
go get something, but I also don't want to be kept at the same time.
I don't mind
Mm.
being kept, but don't expect me to clean and cook. I'm
It's
not doing
it's
that.
it's whatever you say it is. Whatever you and your partner or partners decide that it's going to be, because that's really all that fucking matters.
Yeah,
Like, you boil
but
it down to how you exist with the people that you are going to spend time with in community with in life. And if we can respect each other at the end of the day, I can 100% say, as long as you are contributing to society in a positive manner,
Good to go.
yeah,
that's it. People just scared they're going to lose their soapbox. That's what it be.
pride gets in the way. But like I said, we're over by like half an hour, but it's great, right? This conversation was amazing.
Excuse me.
Um, and this is like I feel like did we do another masculine uh topic before talking about masculinity? I feel like we did.
It was like a little piece of change, but we ain't did the whole situation on. I mean,
Yeah, we
we
did the
could
whole
really turn this
situation.
into a
All
series and invite our non-binary siblings on, invite our feminine siblings on, and we could talk about all that. We could get really
right.
real to the nitty gritty.
That is actually the plan. So anybody listening that falls in any of those categories anywhere that want to hop on here and talk about their version of masculinity or how they define it or how much they hate it, right? Or how much they hate men and why they hate men, right? Or what have you. Um, we
It's a
definitely want to
thing.
hear from you. And yeah, in real life, because y'all now y'all got me questioning, thinking about how do I feel about men? Have I ever hated men? Right. So I'm going to think about that.
Mhm.
Right. Something I never thought about. Right. But if anybody wants to come on and join our conversation, just hit that, go to that link right there, and let us know. Because yeah, or because I feel like this is a great conversation in general. Because right now masculinity, to be honest, is being redefined. Right at the end of the day, it's truly being redefined, and conversations like these is that's the defining it. Right. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Who tuned in? We've had one person that's been on this whole time. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Was it
Again,
me?
you can still support us. Click on our link tree. You said you hey. Click on our link tree um, to find out more information. Right
Comment,
now, I
like,
don't think we have
subscribe.
all that fun stuff because we are on the YouTube, we are on the Facebook, the Instagram, we even on the TikTok. We on all of the
Don't do
things.
that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't pretend like
I just
don't
want to
pretend like you
sure
old.
the is not
Right.
any of those websites.
Don't do that.
Say that.
TikTok, the Facebook.
It took a lot of practice for that, but
You might have some 40 and over people watching that might really type in the fit. You know what I mean? So
no, shoot, my fault. My fault.
The
I practiced
Facebook.
that.
everybody sub
It's not
40
the.
knows that's not it.
Mhm.
We are not the Ohio State University. Okay.
We're not the
No,
Black
they're.
TransMen.
Shoot. So yeah,
We
appreciate
love
everybody who
y'all.
tuned in. Like, share. Thank you. Have a good night. See y'all next month.